Alright, wife. I'm gonna do my best to move faster than the last two videos. I made it through half a book in the time it took 10 chapters in this one. So we'll get started with chapter 11, titled What Lies Hidden. Egwene is looking for something to point to Chanchico. Should they actually go there? Was the Black Ajah lying to them? And so she decides perhaps I can get answers in Tel'aran'rhiod, the world of dreams. She has the ring Ter'angreal that allows her to get into the world of dreams, but decides not to use it. She'd like to try doing it on her own. And so Nynaeve, Elaine, and Aviendha watch over her body while she sleeps. And as she falls asleep, she wakes in Tel'aran'rhiod. She thinks to herself, I need to be in Tanchico, and as she opens her eyes, suddenly she's inside the palace in Tanchico, as if all you had to do was think it. And she finds several Angreal, which is exactly what she's trying to find, since they recovered 2 Angreal from the 2 Black Ajah they got, but there's still 11 more that were stolen from the tower. And she thinks to herself, I wonder if the Aiel Wise Ones would be able to teach me more about dream walking, since Aviendha said that they do so. And before she even realizes it, she's in the middle of a desert, watching an Aiel woman hunt a boar with spears. The woman stops and turns towards Egwene. This woman didn't accidentally dream herself into Tel'aran'rhiod. She's there. Quickly, Egwene pictures Tanchico in her mind again, and suddenly she's back where she was before. She's walking through Tanchico, and she thinks to herself, man, this is taking a while. If this were really a dream, I could just fly. And then she's like, wait. And suddenly, she's no longer touching the ground. And she's thinking to herself, this is absurd. People can't fly. But she knows she's in a dream, and so she takes off into the air, scanning the streets below her, and just laughing in exhilaration. She's flying over rooftops. But eventually she realizes, wait, if the Black Ajah are here and in the world of dreams, they would clearly see me. I'm a fool. And she goes back down to the ground. And as she does so, she sees the same Aiel woman with a spear pointed at Egwene. Egwene quickly tries to explain, she's not a threat, she's a friend, and dresses herself in Caden Sor, which is the Aiel warrior garb. It's basically a coat and breeches, like normal pants, that are brown and gray with some knee-high boots. And that's what all the Aiel men and the maidens wear. But the Aiel woman says Egwene has no right to be wearing Caden Sor. And suddenly, Egwene looks down and realizes she is completely naked. She concentrates very hard on, I'm wearing clothes. And suddenly she was, in her normal clothes. The woman asks, are you from the White Tower? It's been long since they've had a dream walker. I am Amys, of the 9 Valleys Sept of the Tardad Aiel. And Egwene's like, you're a wise one? You are, and you know Tel'aran'rhiod. My name's Egwene Elvire. I'm Aes Sedai of the Green Ajah. Remember, she's passing herself off as a full Aes Sedai. And Amys is like, it surprised me that you were able to overcome what I did and put on proper clothes. Why did you come here, though? And Egwene explains, I'm trying to find members of the Black Ajah, Dark Friends. And Amys is like, they exist then, an Ajah of Shadowrunners in the White Tower. And she shakes her head and says, you're basically a baby here, and you are running around without any idea what it means to be in the world of dreams. There is a darkness in this spot here in the world of dreams, an evil. And Egwene's like, if I describe them, can you find this evil? And Amys is like, you're a child, demanding a gift from her father this very minute when you know nothing about the value of the gift you demand. You have so much to learn, more than I can teach you right now. Come to the threefold land. I will spread words throughout the clans that an Aes Sedai called Egwene Alvir is to be brought to me at Cold Rock's Hold. Give your name and show your great serpent ring, and they will allow you passage. I'm not there now, but I will return from Rhuidean before you arrive. But Egwene says, please, you have to help me. I have to know if they're here. And Amiss just says, but I cannot tell you. I don't know them or this place. You must come to me. What you do is far more dangerous than you know. You must... Wait, where are you going? Stay! And something seems to snatch Egwene, pulling her into darkness. And as she fades away, she hears Amiss's voice saying, you must come to me and learn. You must. Chapter 12 is titled Tanchico, or the Tower. She wakes up to Elaine basically shaking her, and Elaine, when she sees Egwene open her eyes, is like, oh, you weren't waking up no matter what we did. And Egwene starts telling them about her meeting with Amiss, and Egwene asks Aviendha, do you know anyone named Amiss, or something called Cold Rock's Hold? And Aviendha kind of grimaces, and she's like, Amiss is a wise one who is a dream walker. She is also a sister wife to Leon, who is my sister mother. And the girls are like, I don't understand that. But basically, Aviendha explains Amiss and Leon are both married to the same man. And the other three girls, Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine, are like, what? But once they hear the explanation and about Amiss, they decide it is best for Egwene to go there and learn about Teleran Rhode, while Elaine and Nynaeve split off to search for the Black Ajah. Suddenly the door opens and Moiraine comes into the room and announces Joya and Amiko were killed during the attack on the stone, and it was gruesome. No one ever saw a murderer come in or leave. Their bodies were just there, what was left of them. They spill the beans of Egwene's plan to go to the Aiel Waste, the Threefold Land, and Aviendha says, I'd rather stay with Elaine and Nynaeve to go to Tanchico. And the girls are surprised, like, why wouldn't you want to go escort Egwene to your homeland? And it almost seems like Aviendha is pouting that she has to go back, and they don't really understand it. But then Moiraine pulls out a letter, and she says, I received this letter. I don't know how they knew I was here, but it was addressed to me and said, the letter says, there is among the maidens of the spear in the Stone of Tyr a willful girl named Aviendha of the 9 Valleys Sept of the Tar Dad Ale. She must now come to us. There can be no more waiting or excuses. We will await her on the slopes of Chaindair above Rhuidean. There's more about you, Moiraine explains, but mainly saying I need to make sure you go without delay. And it's signed by the Wise Ones and Amiss. And Aviendha kind of pouts. She's like, I'm a maiden of the spear. I don't go running like a child when someone calls my name. I'll go to Tanchico if I want. And Egwene hears the reluctance and says, it's all right. If you want to go there, I'm at least happier protecting Elaine and Nynaeve. Moiraine then says, I showed this letter to Rhuarc, just as the letter asked me to. He seemed quite determined you're going to do what the letter says, Aviendha. I think it's wise to do that, don't you agree? And Aviendha just looks around the room at all the girls and says, I'm a maiden of the spear. And she leaves the room without another word. Egwene's wondering why the Wise Ones want Aviendha to go there, but it is what it is. And, they start planning for their 2 separate trips. And Moiraine says, well, if the two of you, talking to Nynaeve and Elaine, are going to go to Tanchico, there's a sea folk ship at the docks that you can take. And Elaine asks, what is Rand going to do? And Moiraine just says, I don't want a war. I want what will see him alive to fight the last battle. He says he'll tell us tomorrow what he means to do. Tomorrow we will all know more than we do tonight. And Elaine thinks to herself, tomorrow, what will he do when I tell him? What will he say? He has to understand, and we don't know what she's referring to. Chapter 13 is titled Rumors. We go to Matt, who is in a tavern just drinking, and he overhears a conversation. These random men in the bar are talking about the two rivers. Matt goes up to them and is like, "What did you say about the two rivers?" And the man seems to think Matt is a noble since he's wearing like noble clothes at this point. And the merchant that he's talking to is like, "Oh, just that it doesn't seem like there's going to be any tobacco coming out of the two rivers this year. See, it seems the White Cloaks have moved there in search of the false dragon as well as a man with golden eyes." And Matt's like, "Oh, well, I know who those two are." And he asks the man, "Are they hunting anyone else by chance?" And the guy's like, "Not that I know of, just those two." And Matt's like, "Okay, cool." He quickly goes back to the stone to talk to Perrin about the news, and as he walks into Perrin's room, he finds Perrin's already packing his bags. Perrin heard the news on his own, and is just debating to himself how to tell Fail he's leaving for the Two Rivers. He asks Matt if Matt wants to come with, and Matt, realizing he really does want to, just something is stopping him from saying yes. Rand's pull on him is too strong, he thinks. In the end, he just settles for making Perrin promise to take care of Matt's family while he's there. As Matt leaves Perrin's room, he runs into Berelain, and he says, "A good evening to you, my lady," and she just walks past, and Matt's like, "Are you deaf as well as blind, woman? I'm not a carpet to walk over. If I pinch your bottom, you can slap my face, but until you do, I expect a civil word." And Berelain looks back at him and then turns away and keeps walking, murmuring to herself, and the only thing Matt can make out is, "Too much like me." And he stares at her as she walks away. And Matt just realized, I was even flirting with Berelain. Oh man, something's wrong. And he takes out a gold coin and starts playing with it, and then he's like, "Burn all Aes Sedai, and burn Rand al'Thor for getting me into this." And as he says that out loud, a servant passes him, and he's just staring at him. And Matt tosses him the gold mark and says, "From the biggest fool in the world, spend it well on woman and wine." And the guy's like, "Thank you, my lord." And Matt just walks on, leaving him standing there. Chapter 14 is titled Customs of Mayene. Perrin keeps packing for his trip back to the Two Rivers. He doesn't want to go home, but he knows he has to fulfill his duty there. Suddenly his door opens, and Berelain walks in, asking him where is he going. "I'm leaving myself, you know." She says, "Tonight convinced me the way all that lightning flowing down the halls. I will leave tomorrow." And Perrin's like, "Why are you coming in here to tell me that?" And she's like, "So you can tell the Lord Dragon, of course. It'd be better from a friend." He's like, "I don't think he wants to see me right now. I'm probably not even going to see him again. Ask a servant to deliver it for you." She's like, "You're not going to do it for me?" And Perrin just says, "No, haven't you been listening to me?" And then she looks at his eyes and says, "Such striking eyes." And suddenly he realizes he's not wearing a shirt. Quickly, he snatches one and puts it on, and he says, "Give your message to a servant. I'm going to bed." She doesn't leave, though, and asks, "Are you a blacksmith? I have need of a blacksmith in Mayene, making ornamental ironwork. You want to come there before returning to the Two Rivers? You may find Mayene entertaining." And Perrin's just like, "I'm going home, and you're going back to your room." And she's like, "Perhaps another day. I always get what I want in the end." Ornamental ironwork is what I want for my bedchamber. Suddenly, Fail comes into the door and is like, "Perrin, I went in the city looking for you and heard a rumor." And she cuts off, staring at Berelain. Quickly, she walks up to him and basically hugs him and almost kisses him, but instead just traces the side of his face and says, "Remember, I always get what I want." And she just walks right past Fail. Perrin gets nervous, knowing that Fail's probably going to explode at what she just saw, but she just says, "I see you've heard the rumor already." "It's only a rumor, Perrin." And Perrin's like, "Yellow eyes make it more than that." And Perrin's just wondering, why is she so cool? She should be erupting like twigs on a fire right now. And Fail's like, well, it took weeks for that rumor to reach all the way to Tyr, and it's gonna take you a bunch more weeks to ride to the two rivers. The White Cloaks could be gone by then. Well, I guess I have been asking for you to leave, so we can go. I just wanted to set expectations. And Perrin just says, it won't take weeks if I travel through the ways. 2 or 3 days, maybe. And she's like, you're as mad as Rand al'Thor. They've been dark for, 400 years? Loial could tell you. And he's just like, I've used them before. Loial will guide me. And Fail's like, well, I want an adventure. This is definitely it. I wonder if Tom will come with. If we can't have a bard, a gleeman will do. He should compose the story about us. And she's like, when do we leave? In the morning? And he's like, I will be going myself, Fail. Just me and Loial. And she just continues on like he didn't even say anything. She's like, well, we'll need a horse, 2 probably. The ways are dark. Lanterns, oil. Your people are farmers, right? Will they even fight the White Cloaks? And she's like, Fail, I heard what you said, she said. I heard and it makes no sense. What if the farmers won't fight or don't know how? Who's going to teach them? You? Alone? And he just says, I'll do what has to be done. And then she says, you think Berelain will go with you? Will she guard your back? Or maybe you want her to sit on your lap and squeal? Tuck your shirt in, you hairy oaf. Why is it so dark in here? Berelain likes dim light, does she? A lot of good that'll do you against the children of the light. And Perrin just says, she looks like a pleasant armful, Berelain. What man wouldn't want her on his lap? When I'm done, maybe I will go to Mayene. She asked me to. And I might. And Fail doesn't say a word. She just stares at him with a face of stone and runs out of the door, slamming it behind her. Perrin stares at the slash that the axe made when it went crazy at the door and he finds himself telling the door what he couldn't tell her. I killed White Cloaks. They would have killed me if I hadn't, but they still call it murder. I'm going home to die, Fail. That's the only way I can stop them hurting my people, letting them hang me. I can't let you see that. You might even try to stop it, and His head just drops against the door. But he knew. She'd go find adventure elsewhere, safe from White Cloaks and ta'veren and bubbles of evil, and that was what mattered. And he just wished to himself he didn't want to howl with grief. We switch to Fail's point of view. She's stalking through the hallway, basically at a run, and she's thinking, he wants a milk-faced vixen who runs around half naked, does he? He doesn't even know what he wants. Hairy lummox, wooded-headed buffoon, blacksmith, and that sneaking sow Berelain, that prancing she-goat. And suddenly she realizes she's caught up to Berelain. She runs up to her and says, Perrin Aybara belongs to me. You keep your hands and smiles away from him. And she gets embarrassed. She had promised herself before she'd never fight over a man like a farm girl like this. And Berelain just says, belongs to you. Strange, I saw no collar on him. You serving girls, or are you a farmer's daughter? Have the most peculiar ideas. Serving girl, I'm... And she bites her tongue. Fail thinks to herself, there are estates in Saldea larger than the entire city-state of Mayene. Berelain could never last in Saldea. Could she ride all day, then play the cittern at night while discussing how to counter Trolloc raids? She thought she knew men, did she? Did she know the language of fans? Could she tell a man to come or go or stay or other things just by twisting her wrist by the placement of the fan? And she's like, light shine on me. What am I thinking? I swore I would never even hold a fan again. And suddenly she has a knife in her hand. And she says, farm girls in Saldea have a way with dealing with women who poach others' men. If you don't swear to forget Perrin Aybara, I will shave your head bald as an egg. Perhaps the boys who tend the chickens will pant after you then. Suddenly, without her even realizing how, Berelain had her wrist, and Fail was flying through the air, crashing into her back and driving the air from her lungs. And Berelain just smiles and says, you know, people of Tyr like to use assassins, so we're trained to be attacked. And I'll tell you what, this is what I'm going to do, girl. I will take the blacksmith away from you and keep him as a pet for as long as he amuses me. Ogier's oath on it, farm girl. He's quite ravishing, really. Those shoulders, those arms, not to mention those eyes of his. And if he's a bit uncultured, I can have that remedied. My courtiers can teach him how to dress and rid him of that awful beard. Wherever he goes, I will find him and make him mine. You can have him when I'm finished. If he still wants you, of course. And Fail gets to her feet, pulls out a second knife, and says, I will drag you to him after I cut off those clothes you're almost wearing, and make him tell you are nothing but a sow. The girls are about to fight, and suddenly Ruark, the Aiel clan chief, is there between them, snatching both their knives away, and says, Have you not seen enough blood already tonight? Of those I thought would break the peace, you two are the last I would have named. He addresses Berelain and says, You will go to your room and not come out until this next day. I will see you are not brought breakfast. Hunger will remind you there's a time and a place for fighting. And she's like, I am the first of Mayene. I will not be ordered about, and you will go to your room now, he said. If you don't, we will repeat our first talk together. Berelain's face went white, and she says, Very well. If you insist, I will. I did not propose a discussion. If I can still see you when I've counted to 3. 1. And Berelain picks up her skirts and literally runs away. Fail then asks Ruark, as it's just the two of them, Let me go, and give me those knives back. Those are mine. And he says, Forfeit. Berelain's punishment for fighting you was to have her sent to bed like a child. Yours is to lose the knives you prize. I know you have others. If you argue, I might take those too. And she asks, What first talk did you have? Why'd she run? And he says, That's between her and me. You will not go near her again, Fail. I don't think she started that. She doesn't use knives. Fail, as Ruark walks away, Fail finds herself asking in her head, I wonder if I could trick Berelain into pissing Ruark off again. It'd be fun to see the punishment. And she laughs out loud and says, He'll take him from me, you silly peahen. By the time you see him again, he'll be mine once more. And she walked on, her heart feeling just a bit lighter. Alright, wife. Chapter 15 is titled Into the Doorway. And you brace yourself, because this will not a super long chapter, but it'll probably be a bit longer one, because the wording of a lot of things in this chapter is very important. There are 3 chapters in this book that are like that, where the actual wording is very crucial to the story. And so I'll try to summarize as much as I can, but there are a conversation in this chapter I'll pretty much have to read. So, we start off with Mat, and he's going into the basement of the Stone of Tear. He makes his way to the great hold under the Stone of Tear where all the ter'angreal are kept, and there's a lot of different boxes, but he sees in the back what he's looking for. A red door frame ter'angreal, the one he learned about from Egwene. It looked twisted, like it was an impossible shape, like the corners didn't join right, and it looked like it could fall over, but no matter how hard he pushed it, just attempts, it would not budge. And he thinks to himself, well, Egwene must know what she's talking about. She's been studying to be Aes Sedai. And if it works, well, won't know if it does till I try. And he says, Look! And he steps through. As he steps through, there's a brilliant white light, infinitely bright, and he went blind and a roaring filled his ears. And it sounded like infinite sound was going into his mind for a single step. And then, as he concluded his step again, he stared around. The ter'angreal was there behind him, but he was not where he started. He was in a room with these yellow columns with huge vines curling around them, glowing spheres atop of these white metal stands. He almost turned around to go back through the gateway when he heard, "A long time." He jumped and pulled out his knife, finding the source of the kind of breathy voice that said the words. And the voice says, "A long time, yet the seekers come again for answers. The questioners come once more." A shape looks at Mat and says, "Good. You have brought no lamps, no torches, as the agreement was, and is, and ever will be. You have no iron, no instruments of music. The figure stepped out, tall, barefoot, arms and legs and body around like layers of yellow cloth, and Matt wasn't even sure if this was a man or even human. The thing looked human, but far too thin for how tall he was, with a very narrow face. And it reminded him of a snake's. And the eyes were just black vertical slits. Definitely not human. Iron, instruments of music, you have none? And Matt was thinking to himself, he doesn't seem to be very concerned about my knife. Well, the knife is steel, not iron, so he thinks that to himself and then says out loud, nope, no iron, no instruments of... Wait, why? But he cut off his question. 3 questions, Egwene said, and he wasn't about to waste one on iron or instruments of music, and he's like, why should he care if I have a dozen musicians in my pocket and a smith on my back? And he says, I've come here for true answers. If you're not the one to give them, take me to who can. And the creature smiled, but didn't show teeth, and the creature says, according to the agreement, come, follow. And Matt makes the knife disappear and says, lead and I will follow. And his skin starts to crawl, like something's wrong here. He followed the man, if that's what it was, through hallways where the ceilings were arched and the walls went outwards. The halls were a constant curve with round doorways, and the windows were perfect circles. There were no pictures or wall hangings or paintings or anything on the walls. Just weird patterns and these curves. And as they walked, there was no one else around. The whole place could be empty except for Matt and the creature, for all he knows. He kept thinking he saw people as he would go by, but as he would turn, there was never anyone there. It did not feel reassuring. He looked out some of the round windows as they walked and saw these very tall trees with an umbrella of branches at the top. Everything looked like that no matter which side of the hallway the windows were on, except once. Through one window he saw 3 very tall silver spires curving in towards each other so their points all aimed at the same spot. And Matt began to think this walk seemed infinite, and he asked, when are... and he ground his teeth. 3 questions, he reminded himself. It's hard to learn anything without asking questions, and he just said, I hope you're taking me to those who can answer my questions. Burn my bones, I do. For my sake and yours, the light know it true. And suddenly the fellow says, here. And he gestures to a door twice as large as any before. And he said, here your answers may be found. Enter. Enter and ask. He took a step towards the doorway and looked back at the creature, and the fellow was gone. He tried not to think about it and stepped through. He was in another room with red and white tiles on the floor. In front of him were 3 very thick pedestals, and a man, just like the guide, was on top of each, in red instead of the bright yellow from before. And these 3 looked almost feminine in a very strange way. And the woman on the right says, it has been long. And the woman on the left says, very long. And the man in the middle, because one of them was a male, says, yet they come again. And all 3 speak at once, enter and ask according to the agreement of old. And his skin started writhing in uncomfortableness from what he was hearing. And he was very careful not to say anything that even sounded like a question. He told them about his situation, the White Cloaks, hunting him and his friend, one of his friends going to face the White Cloaks, his family, maybe in danger, maybe not, and a ta'veren. And he never mentioned, Rand being the Dragon Reborn or anything, but he wanted them to understand who he was and what he was getting after. And so he asked his first question, which he thought about before he even came into the Great Hold where the ter'angreal was, and he asked, should I go home to help my people? The 3 eyes lifted from him and studied the air above his head. And finally the woman on the left says, "You must go to Reudian." The three look at him again, and suddenly a loud bell tolled, very loud. "He is another! The strain! The strain! The saver! It has been too long! There is yet time!" All three of them sounded calm, but there was a sharpness to her voice when she turned to Matt and said, "Ask! Ask!" And Matt glared at them. "Reudian? Light, that was somewhere in the waste. That was all he knew, in the waste." And anger drove the questions out of his mind about how to get back the lost parts of his memory, and he just said, "Reudian? The light burn my bones to ash if I want to go to Reudian, and my blood on the ground if I will. Why should I? You're not going to answer my questions. You're supposed to answer, not have me riddles." If you do not go to Reudian, you will die." The bell tolled again, even louder, and Matt felt a tremor through his boots. All three of the figures looked anxious. "The strain! It is too great!" The savor of him," the other woman said. "It has been so very long." "The strain is too great, too great! Ask! Ask!" And Matt says, "Burn your soul for a craven heart. I will at that. Why will I die if I don't go to Reudian? I very likely will die if I try. It makes no... You will have sidestepped the thread of fate, left your fate to drift on the winds of time, and you will be killed by those who do not want that fate fulfilled. Now go! You must go! Quickly!" Suddenly the figure in yellow came back, tugging at his sleeve, and Matt shook him off. "No, I will not go. You've led me from the questions I wanted to ask and given me senseless answers. You won't leave it there. What fate are you talking about? I will have at least one clear answer out of you." The bell tolled a third time, and the entire room trembled. "Go! You have had your answers. You must go before it is too late." Suddenly, a dozen of the men in yellow were around Matt. They seemed to appear out of midair, pulling him towards the door, and he yelled, "What fate? Burn your hearts, what fate?" And the room itself seemed to be peeling, the walls and the floor quivering. And he asked, "What fate?" And the three stood on their feet on top of the pedestal, and he couldn't tell which, but one of them shrieked the answer. "To marry the daughter of the 9 moons, to die and live again, and live once more a part of what was, to give up half the light of the world to save the world." And the people, if that's what they were, howled like steam escaping under pressure. "Go to Reudian, son of battles! Go to Reudian, trickster! Go, gambler! Go!" And he yelled, "Burn your eyes, the shadow take your souls, I'll have your guts for saddle girth." But those fingers around him were twisting with grips like iron. Twice more the bell tolled, as well as the entire palace. Everything shook as if it were an earthquake, the reverberations deafening to his ears, each one louder than the last, and they start running towards the door with Matt with them. After a while, he suddenly saw the twisted ter'angreal doorway and flew through it, the white light blinding him, and he fell onto a dusty floor. And he yelled, "Burn me, you can't throw me." And he ran back at the ter'angreal to jump back through, went through and hit barrels that were on the other side, winding up exactly where he started. And he tried it again, and still, as he passed the white threshold, wound up exactly where he started again. Why wasn't the ter'angreal working? Maybe those creatures had shut it off somehow. Man, you would have thought the roof was coming down on their heads. Come to think of it, it very nearly had. And Reudian, and all the rest of it. The waste was bad enough, but they said he was fated to marry someone called the Daughter of the 9 Moons. Marry! And to a noble woman, by the sound of it. He'd sooner marry a pig than a noble woman. And that business about dying and living again. Nice of them to add that last bit. If some Aielman killed him on the way to Reudian, he'd find out how true it was. But it was all nonsense. He didn't believe a word of it. Well, except the ter'angreal had taken him somewhere, and they had only wanted to answer 3 questions, like Egwene said. And Matt yelled, "I won't marry any bloody noblewoman. I'll marry when I'm too old to have any fun, that's what. Rudy and my bloody..." And as he cuts off, a boot appeared out of the doorway. And the boot was followed quickly. Sorry, I paused it. We just had an earthquake. And another one. Sorry about that. The boot that came through the ter'angreal was followed by Rand. And he kind of jumped a little bit when he saw Matt and asked, "Just poking around, Matt? Or did you go through too?" And Matt starts looking at Rand. Well, he didn't look like he was channeling right now. He didn't look like he was mad yet. But that's a different Rand than the boy I grew up with. And he just answered, "Oh, I went through all right. Bunch of bloody liars if you ask me. What are they? Made me think of snakes." And Rand just says, "Not liars, I think. Not that. They were afraid of me right from the first. And when that tolling started, my sword kept them back. They wouldn't even look at it. Shied away, hid their eyes. Did you get your answers?" Nothing that makes sense," Matt said. "What about you?" And suddenly, Moraine comes out of the ter'angreal. And she immediately sees them, and her mouth tightens, and she says, You were both in there. This is why one of you would have been bad enough, but two ta'veren at once? You might have torn the entire connection entirely and been trapped there. Wretched boys playing with things you don't know the danger of. Perrin! Is Perrin in there too? Did he share your exploit?" And Matt's like, "Last I saw, he was getting ready to go to bed." And he thought to himself, maybe he'll make it clear of her at least. And Moraine angrily asked, "Who told you of this? At least you escaped with your lives. But who told you? Which one? I'll make her wish I'd peeled off her hide like a glove." And Rand's just like, "A book told me. A pair of books, in fact. Treasures of the Stone and Dealings with the Territory of Mayene. Surprising what you can dig out of books if you read long enough, isn't it?" And she looks at Matt. "And you? Did you read it in a book too? You?" And he said, "I do read sometimes. Treasures, dealings, lots of things in books." Yeah, and he's like, "Thank God she didn't ask me the titles, really. I stopped paying attention." And she asks Rand, "And your answers?" And Rand replies, "Are mine." It wasn't easy, though. They brought a woman to interpret, but she talked like an old book. I could hardly understand the words. I never considered they might speak another language. "The old tongue," Moraine said. "They used the old tongue, a rather harsh dialect of it, for their dealings with men. And you, Matt, was your interpreter easily understood?" And Matt's mouth was dry. The old tongue, is that what it was? They didn't give me one. In fact, I never got to ask any questions. The bells started shaking the walls, and they hustled me out like I was tracking cow manure on the rugs. I almost understood a word here and there, but not to know it. Both of you got answers. What do they get out of it? The legs with snakes. Sorry, I mean snakes with legs. Everyone's checking up on each other after the earthquake. So my phone keeps... Oh, there it is. Oh, that one was you. And my phone keeps going off. I need to mute this. Hold on. And so anyway, Matt is like, what do they get out of it? And Moraine's just like, sensations, emotions, experience. You can feel them doing it, making your skin crawl. They must feed on them in some manner, perhaps. The person who studied this ter'angreal before wrote of a strong desire to bathe afterward. I certainly intend to. And Rand asked, "But their answers are true? You're sure of it?" "The answers are true, so long as they're in regards to your own future. That much is certain. As to how, there's only speculation. The world is folded in strange ways. I can't be clearer. It may be that allows them to read the thread of a human life, in a way that might be woven into the pattern. Or maybe it's just a talent of their people. If you need help working out what your answers mean, I offer my services." And Rand smiled. "Will you tell me what you asked and what they answered?" And she starts walking towards the door without saying a word. Matt calls after her, "Why can't you go in there twice, Moraine? Why?" He almost asked about the iron and instruments, but bit his tongue. He can't let them know he understood what they were saying. And she said, "If I knew everything, Matrim, I would not need to ask questions. And she exited the room. Rand then asked, Did you find out what you wanted? And Mat replied, Did you? Neither answer. And Mat asked, Are you really going to let the White Cloaks do what they want back home? You know they're heading for Emond's Field. Yellow eyes, bloody dragon reborn. It's too much otherwise. And Rand just responded in a pained voice, Perrin will do what he has to do to save Emond's Field, and I must do what I have to, or more than Emond's Field will fall, and to worse than White Cloaks. And Mat watched Rand leave, and he snatched his lamp and thought to himself, Rhuidean, Light, what am I gonna do? Alright, wife, back to normal. We're gonna start with chapter 16, titled Leave Takings. Perrin's been having nightmares. Nightmares of fighting White Cloaks because they're killing Faile. Also, I looked in the glossary and it's pronounced Faile. It's spelled F-A-I-L-E, Faile. But I'm going to keep calling her Faile because that's how I pronounced it in my head. So, you're going to get the wrong one. Perrin wakes up and he sees that there's really not a lot of evidence of last night's attack because all the servants were just out all night trying to clean it up. But Perrin still smells the blood. He goes to find Loial, get ready to leave, and sees that he has a big lump on his head. And he's like, I'll go get Moiraine to heal that. And Loial's like, no. Like, there's others who have far worse injuries. They need her energy. And then he hears, Loial is a hero. And it was Faile, who was hiding behind a bank of flowers, which would explain why Perrin couldn't smell her. She says, he gathered as many children as he could, and some of their mothers, into a large room, and he held the doors by himself against Trollocs and Myrddraal the entire fight. And Loial's like, I'm not a hero. I didn't do barely anything. And she's like, nonsense. Every woman in the stone would marry you if you were human. And some would anyway. And he tells Loial, I need to get back to the Two Rivers. And he's like, yes, but my book and Rand's story and yours and Mat's. I have so many notes. I've spent all night staying up writing about what happened. But, I want to be the one to write the true story of the Dragon Reborn. I'm someone that's traveled with him. But Perrin just says, I need you, Loial. And you're not going to write your book if your mother ends up finding you and sends you away anyway, so let's keep moving. And Loial's like, I don't understand, Perrin, why? And Perrin admits, there's White Cloaks in the Two Rivers hunting me. Loial's like, why? And Perrin's like, it doesn't matter, but they're going to hurt the people I love, and I need you to take me there by the ways. And Loial's like, well, of course I'll help. And then Faile clears her throat and says, are you not forgetting something, Loial? You promised to take me into the ways whenever I asked, and before you took anyone else. And Loial's like, oh, I did promise that. Well, you can look inside the ways when Perrin and I go. And Perrin's like, Faile will not be coming, just you and me. And Faile just ignores him and says, you're going to take me before anyone else. You swore to it. And Loial's like, I did, but only because you said you didn't believe me that I would show you. And she's like, you swore by your mother and your mother's mother and your mother's mother's mother. And he's like, yes, I did, but Perrin. You swore, Loial. Do you mean to break your oath? And Perrin is just grinding his teeth. And he says, she tricked you, Loial. She deliberately tricked you. And Faile says, only because I had to, Loial. Because a fool man thinks he can order my life to suit himself. I'd not have done it otherwise. You must believe me. And Faile just says, Ogier keep their word, and Loial's going to take me to the Two Rivers. And Loial's like, but that means I can help Perrin after all. Faile, why'd you drag this out like this? It's not funny. And Faile just says, if he asks. No one but you and me unless they ask me, we agreed. Perrin has to ask me to come. And Perrin's like, no, I will not ask. I will ride to Emond's Field. I will walk, so give up this foolishness. Tricking Loial, trying to force yourself in where where you aren't wanted. And Perrin's just panicking. It would take weeks to reach the Two Rivers with his horse, but they could be there in a day or two through the ways. And Perrin just says, then I'll travel the ways by myself. I'll follow you two. If I stay far back enough so I'm not part of your party, I won't be breaking Loial's oath, and you can't stop me from following. And Loial's like, that's dangerous. You can't do that, Perrin. Just ask Fail. And Perrin just says, I can't. Or anyway, I won't. And Loial looks at Fail. Fail, it's too dangerous for him to do this. Please stop. And she says, no. If he's too stiff-necked to ask, why should I? Why should I even care if he gets lost? And she looks at Perrin and says, you can travel close to us, as close as you need, so long as it's plain you're following. You'll trail after me like a puppy until you ask. And Fail just says, we're leaving in 2 hours, Perrin. You better meet us out there or we'll leave you behind. You hear me? And he walks out. And he's just thinking to himself, stubborn, mule-headed woman. And as he walks out, he runs into Gaul, and he's like, may you find shade this morning, Gaul, in a traditional Aiel greeting. And Gaul's like, I heard you meant to go to the Two Rivers. And Perrin's like, how do you know? And Gaul's like, well, Rand al'Thor told me and asked me to not tell anyone, but I'm going to come with you. And he's like, Perrin's like, come with me? What? Rand asked you to come with me? And Gaul's like, no, he just said you were going, and there were men who might try to kill you, but I want to accompany you if you'll have me. And Perrin's like, will I have you? I will that. Oh, we'll be in the ways in a few hours. And he's like, the ways? And Perrin's like, does that make a difference? And Gaul just says, death comes for all men, Perrin. Basically relenting to his fate. We switch over to Elaine's point of view, and she's with Egwene and Nynaeve. They're all packed up and ready to start their journey to Tanchico and get a move on. And Egwene ready to get into the wastes, where she's going to go with Aviendha. And they're essentially talking about a letter that Elaine wrote to Rand. And she's very nervous about it, but she's like, oh, well, at least he won't open it until I'm gone, because I told him. And they're just talking about how difficult men are to manage. But Elaine basically wrote a letter that lays out her entire heart to Rand, is what you get out of the context. Suddenly, the door bursts open so hard it bounced against the wall. Elaine and Egwene both embrace Saidar, and Nynaeve probably would have if she could. And in comes Lan. And Lan only has eyes for Nynaeve and says, you let me believe you are returning to Tar Valon. And she just says, you may have believed it, but I never said it. Never said it. Never said it. You spoke of leaving today, and always linked your leaving with those dark friends being sent to Tar Valon. Always. What do you mean me to think? But I never said, light woman, don't bandy words with me. And they were all stunned. Lan, a man of iron self-control, was at a breaking point. But Nynaeve, who often let her anger get the better of her, faced him without emotion. And he's like, why are you going to Tanchico? I found out. You shouldn't be doing this. You're not full Aes Sedai. None of you are. You're just accepted. And then he's like, so you're questioning Moiraine's decision in the Amyrlins. You swore to accept and obey as a warder, and I have things to do. Like, I'm grateful, Lan, that you're concerned, but we have stuff to do. And he's like, why? For the love of the light, at least tell me why. And Nynaeve just says, if Moiraine hasn't told you, perhaps she has reasons. And Lan trembled. And then he said, you'll need someone to help you in Tanchico. I could protect you, Nynaeve. And she just answers, your place is with Moiraine. And he says, Moiraine. I must. Nynaeve, And she just says again, you will remain with Moiraine until she releases you from your bond. You'll do as I say. And she pulls out a letter. It's the letter that they received from the Amyrlins, stating, what the bearer does is at my order and by my authority. Obey and keep silent at my command. And Lan is just like, But this lets you do anything you please. You could speak in her name. Why would she give this to an accepted? And Nynaeve just says, ask no questions I can't answer. Just count yourself lucky I don't tell you to dance for me. You are very full of yourself, Al Land Madragoran. And he's like, full of myself? Nynaeve Elmira, I'm full of myself? And he quickly goes towards him, and Elaine almost wrapped him in flows of air before she could think. But suddenly Nynaeve is just standing there, and the next, her feet are a foot off the floor as he lifted her into the air to kiss her. And she starts kicking his shins and hitting him with fists, but eventually stops, holding onto his shoulders as they do that. After a while, and Elaine thinking about Rand, Lan, lets go, and she's like, you have no right. I will not be manhandled in that fashion for the world to see. And Lan just says, not the whole world. But if they can see, looking at the girls, they can hear as well. You have made a place in my heart where I thought there was no room for anything else. You have made flowers grow where I cultivated dust and stone. Remember this on the journey you insist on making. If you die, I will not survive you long. And also remember, I am not always so easily commanded, even with letters from the Amyrlin. And then he bowed to her. He leaves the room, and Egwene says, he's insufferable. Sometimes he is. Nynaeve, why'd you do that? He was ready to go with you. I know you want to break him free of Moiraine's bond. And Nynaeve just says, not like that. I mean him to be mine, all of him. I will not have him remembering a broken oath to Moiraine. I will not have that between us, for him and myself. And Elaine is thinking to herself, there must be time to get a paper and pen. Nynaeve had the right of it. Men need a firm hand. Rand would find he could not get away from her so easily, and would not find it easy to worm his way back into her good graces. So Elaine's basically like, I need to write him a second letter. Chapter 17 is titled Deceptions. We go to Tom's perspective, who has apparently been trying to help Rand on the sly by manipulating the High Lords of Tyr to get Rand more support. But when he gets back to his room, Moiraine is there, looking through papers in his bedroom. And he berates himself. He's like, she's a beautiful woman, but I can't think that way about an Aes Sedai. Moiraine looks at Tom and touches his leg and heals the stiffness that was in it ever since he tried to stop that Myrddraal in Whitebridge. It couldn't get rid of all the pain, but it was looser than it had been ever since that day. Moiraine just comments about how there were two High Lords who both died, and conveniently they were both leading factions that wanted to kill Rand. And so they're kind of implying, like, Tom manipulated the nobles into killing those two men. Although one of them is still technically alive, but dying. They start talking about history and, like, Tom's time in Andor a little bit, and you actually find out Moiraine is from Karhine, of House Damodred, and she's very closely related to the king of Karhine. She was also Taringale Damodred's half-sister, who was a prince of Karhine, who was someone that married Tigraine, who was the daughter heir of Andor many years ago. It's a bunch of complicated family blood thing. It is kind of important, but it's kind of hard to keep straight in a summary version, so I'm going to skip over stuff. But there may be some revelations later about family stuff that you'll just have to accept, because it's hard. It's really hard to make you understand it in a summary. But anyway, Moiraine is basically like, I don't even use the name Damodred at all. Like, I'm an Aes Sedai, and I left that life behind. And then she says, I want you to go with Elaine and Nynaeve to Tanchico and protect them. Tom's thinking, if I leave, Rand is going to be helpless against Moraine's manipulations. And Moiraine starts talking about Owen Tom's nephew that was taken by Red Aes Sedai, and is basically like, you need to do this to keep these girls safe, and if you go to Tanchico with them, I will give you the names of the Red Sisters who gentled your nephew, Owen. And Tom agrees. We then switch to Min's perspective. And if you recall, Min is staying in the tower, pretending to be Elmendrida. The woman who runs the kitchen in the White Tower has been looking after Elmendrida, thinking she's a very beautiful girl, and she's like sort of treating her like a doll a little bit. And Min's getting very irritated, having to pretend to be like a little ditzy girl kind of thing, like sitting there sewing, wearing pretty dresses. Like, that's not her. She doesn't like that stuff. But she has to keep up the appearances. As she's sitting, Gawain, who is Elaine's brother, comes up to her and they start talking. And as they do, she looks around and sees Logain, a man who is gentled after claiming to be the Dragon Reborn. But it's weird. She looks at him and sees an aura above him, a flaring halo, radiant in gold and blue. And she knew what it meant. Glory. A great promise of glory to come. But how? He's a gentled man. He can't even channel. How could he come to glory? But Min knew her visions are never wrong. She decides she's got to tell the Amyrlin seat. So she goes up to them, leaving Gawain behind. Even though Gawain was basically questioning her about Nynaeve, Elaine, and Egwene, and Min is like, I don't know where they are, and he doesn't believe her, but it is what it is. She goes to the Amyrlin, tells them about Logain, and Siuan is like talking about other things, and she's like, yeah, there's this prophet causing trouble, declaring people for Rand al'Thor, and there's an Aes Sedai missing. People in Karhine are starving, but there's one good news. The Blight to the north has retreated for some reason. It's very strange. A novice comes in with 2 letters delivering to the Amyrlin. One of them basically says, Mazrim Taim has escaped, and one of the sisters that was guarding him is dead. Siuan orders 12 Aes Sedai and 1,000 guards to be sent after him, not willing to risk a false dragon being freed, and ordered him to be gentled the second he's found. The second is that Rand has taken Kalandor. Siuan immediately orders the Hall of the Tower to convene. The Hall of the Tower is basically like Congress. So you can imagine Siuan, the Amyrlin, is like the president, and Congress is the Hall of the Tower. It's not an exact analogy, but it's kind of similar. And she's like, let the Hall of the Tower meet. I'm going to tell them the Dragon Reborn has been born and holds Tyr. And Siuan's like, now we don't have to act in the shadows anymore. Now we can openly guide Rand al'Thor. The perspective then shifts to one last person, Syrah Colvenry. This is an accepted who noticed Elmendrida was actually Min earlier on, and Siuan sent this girl off to a farm to work, basically to keep her out of the way so she couldn't tell anyone like who Min was. But Syrah doesn't know that this is why she was sent there. So it's like, whatever. And as she's working, an Aes Sedai comes up to her. And this Aes Sedai is asking her about Min's arrival. And Syrah just says, but I heard nothing, Aes Sedai. The Keeper sent me away as soon as... And she screamed and spasmed. Struggling for breath, she realized she was on the ground. She didn't even remember falling. And the Aes Sedai just says, everything, girl. Every person this Elmendrida spoke to, tell me about. Every word she said, every nuance and expression. And Syrah just cries into the ground and says, she spoke to Lord Gawain, Aes Sedai. That's all I know, Aes Sedai. And she's crying, knowing that this is not enough to satisfy this Aes Sedai. And she was right. Sirad didn't stop screaming for a very long time, and when the Aes Sedai left, there was not a sound around the farmhouse except for the chickens, not even a woman breathing. Chapter 18 is titled, Into the Ways. We go back to Perrin. Perrin asks Gaul that if anything happens to me, make sure Fail is safe, and Gaul agrees. When they've reached the stables where they're meeting up, they find two maidens of the spear with Fail, Chaiad and Bane. Apparently, Chaiad is of Clan Goshin, and Gaul is of another clan, but the two clans have a blood feud, and so there might be trouble between them. And Perrin's asking, like, why are you traveling with Fail then? And they're like, well, this argument between you and Fail interests them. They all saddle horses and get ready to leave, and the stone rang like a monstrous bell. Perrin feels within him the pull of a ta'veren to a ta'veren, but refuses to change his plans, and he rides out of the stable with Loial and Fail, as well as the 3 Aiel with them, Gaul, Chaiad, and Bane. None of the Aiel are riding horses, though. When they were asked whether they wanted to, they almost looked offended at it. They're very proud of how far and fast they can run. And so they start going on, and the Aiel join them very quickly and manage to keep up. Eventually they reach the Waygate, and Loial moves the Avendesora leaf and opens it. And they see their reflections in there, and Loial says, once the Waygate shone like mirrors, and once those who walked through the ways walked through the sun and the sky. Perrin immediately goes through, determined to get in there before Fail does. Gaul follows him, and they decide not to wait, and Perrin tells Gaul, let's let her sweat for a little bit. Let's go on ahead, and she'll wonder where we went. And so Perrin and Gaul because it's only one way to go, but they walk to the next island, following the white line to the guidepost. They are now in the ways. Chapter 19 is titled The Wave Dancer. Elaine and Nynaeve are in a carriage heading towards the docks. They're trying to find the Seafolk ship, the Athan Mir. And Nynaeve is super angry because the carriage was very uncomfortable and bouncing on rocks and stuff. And she's just complaining about it constantly. And Elaine's like, it's not the driver's fault. It's bad, like, rocks here. They find the two women who are clearly Seafolk. Both of the women have pierced ears and chains running from their nose to their ears, with medallions hanging off the chains. They go up to the two women and introduce themselves, saying they are Aes Sedai of the Green Ajah. One woman introduces herself as the Sail Mistress, and the other as the Wind Finder. Nynaeve asks them to talk to them about the gift of passage. You see, the Seafolk don't charge people for passage. They just expect it as a gift, which coincidentally would be exchanged for a gift of equal value. And so they are brought onto the ship so they can negotiate. There's a female crew member who brings them tea, and she, shockingly to Elaine, was bare to the waist, without a shirt on, just like the men above. But one of the women, the sail mistress, Coine, tells her, you're going to work in the bilges, where clothes are a hindrance. We are not away from land yet. You are not to be dressed in that way. And she's, like, apologizing to Elaine and Nynaeve, saying, like, oh, we're still on land, we know. This isn't normally how we do things while we're still on land, don't worry. Nynaeve then offers Coine 3,000 gold marks to take them to Tanchico, and Coine's like, that's a lot of money. You know, we normally refuse Aes Sedai passage on Seafolk ships. Aes Sedai know this, so they rarely ever ask. And Nynaeve's like, why'd you bring us here if you're going to refuse us? And Coine says, well, I've heard about a man, Rand al'Thor, and prophecies are being fulfilled. You see, we have the Jendai prophecy, the prophecy of the Koramor. Not the one you wait for that will break the world, the dragon reborn. The one we seek is the herald of a new age. You see, during the breaking of the world, our ancestors fled to the safety of the sea while the land heaved and broke as storm waves do. It is said they knew nothing of ships when they took to flee, but the light was with them and they survived. They did not see land again until the world was still once more. We are bound to the sea, salt water courses in our veins. Most of us set no foot on the land except to await another ship. Strong men weep when they must serve ashore. Women ashore go on to ships to bear their children, into a rowboat if no more is at hand. We must be born on the water and die on it, to be given it in death. But the prophecies are being fulfilled. This Rand al'Thor is the Coromor. The Aes Sedai serve him. You're proof of that. The White Tower shall be broken by his name, and Aes Sedai shall kneel to wash his feet and dry them with their hair. And Nynaeve's just like, you're going to wait a long time if you expect me to wash any man's feet. What does this have to do with our passage? Are you going to take us or no? And the girl just asks, Coween just asks, why? Why do you want to go to Tanchico? It's very unpleasant there. And Nynaeve's like, do you always question your passengers? I've offered you enough gold to buy a village. 2 villages. And Elaine decides the time for secrecy is done. We hunt the Black Ajah, mistress. Sail mistress. We believe some are in Tanchico. We must find them, else they may harm the Dragon Reborn, the Coromor. And the Windfinder speaks up and says, the light see us safe to docking. We can take them, sister. We must. Suddenly a man bursts into the room, clearly another sea folk. Tons of knives around him and stuff like that. And he just says, Coween, this fool's willing to trade me 500 snowfox pelts from Kandor for those 3 small barrels of 2 Rivers Tabak I got in Ebo Dar. 500 pelts. He can have them here by midday. And then he looks up from his papers. Forgive me, my wife. I didn't know you had guests. The light be with you all. And Coween just says, by midday, my husband, I will be sailing downriver. By nightfall, I'll be at sea. And the man stiffens and is like, am I still cargo master, wife? Or has my place been taken while I didn't see? And she says, you are cargo master, husband, but we sail for Tanchico. And the man's like, Tanchico? Wife? No. Sail, mistress. You said we were going to Mayene and then east to Shara. I've traded with that in mind. What I have in the holds will bring little to no money in Tanchico. Why are we to be impoverished? And she just says, I'm sail mistress, husband. When the wave dancer sails when and where I say, and that must be enough for now. And he just gets out, as you say, sail mistress. And he leaves. And Coween just mutters to herself, I must make this up to him. Of course, it's pleasant making up with him, usually. And Coween just says again, we will take you, but I don't like this situation. Please, stay below deck as much as you can, and don't wear your Aes Sedai serpent rings. I do this for the Coromor. I will see you safe to where you wish. It is agreed under the light. Suddenly, the wave dancer rose, just like its name, pounding against the dock that they were near. Coween scrambles to her feet and raced for the ladder, already shouting for orders to look for damage to the hull. Chapter 20 is titled Winds Rising. Elaine and Nynaeve join Coween up on the deck to make sure the ship's all right. Elaine thinks that the second letter she sent caused Rand to overreact in Channel, and she's like, men always overreact when they let their emotions go. And as they look towards the dock, they see Tom and Julian are on the trying to board the ship, saying they want passage. Coween actually speaks very highly of Julian, saying he's found people that have stolen from us twice. We hold him in pretty high regard. And says, normally I don't refuse people passage, but because of the circumstances, I will if you ask it. Elaine looks at Tom and thinks she thinks something's very familiar about him, but she can't really remember why. So she looks over to Julian and asks, why do you want to travel with us to Tanchico? You haven't served us very well before. And he, looks very guilty. But he's like, the last time I saw you, I helped you escape, But I was woken up by Lan, and he told me to accompany you to Tanchico. Also, Rand approached me separately and said if I go, he'll give me a lot of gold. Tom speaks up and says, basically, Moraine said to accompany them. But he's like, I'm very helpful and good at many things. And Elaine just looks at Tom, reaches up, and pulls one of his mustaches. And she just says, I seem to remember doing that before. And everyone else is just like, the heck? What? But they agree to take them with under the condition that they will do everything Nynaeve and Elaine tell them to do. Without question, they will obey. And she's like, if you don't agree to that, you are staying. So they, seeing no other choice, agree. So they all board the ship, and they start making their way on the ship with the sea folk. And finally, when they can no longer see the land, all the women on deck, all the sea folk women, take off their blouses. Apparently, this is customary for the sea folk, per the person serving them tea earlier. They start talking with the men, and Tom starts talking about Shara. Apparently, Shara is a land even beyond the Aiel Waste. The sea folk are the only people from the continent that are allowed to even go there. And even they are only allowed into the ports, which are barricaded, keeping them away from all other locations. The Karhainen people used to do it as well, but they were under the same restrictions. Elaine leaves Tom and starts walking about the ship, and she senses something, and she sees one of the women, the Windfinder Joreen, channeling air and water weaves, and it's changing the weather. The wind is getting stronger, and the ship is going faster. Elaine approaches the woman, and she says, I meant not to do this at all, but Coen says we must go quickly. And Elaine comes to the realization, that's why the sea folk don't carry Aes Sedai. That's why you were the one that actually had to give us permission to come aboard. Joreen then explains they keep the power to change the weather through channeling secret because the White Tower will try to interfere otherwise and take their children to the White Tower. They talk about how some Windfinders can channel, and some of the sea folk are sent to the White Tower, but only to avoid suspicion. They keep their strongest and train them to be Windfinders. Elaine promises to keep that secret. Elaine looks at the weaves and sees they are significantly thicker than anything Elaine could have imagined channeling. And so she asks, Joreen, will you teach me? These weaves of air and water are so complex and large. I'm astounded. And Joreen basically says, yes, they will allow us to reach Tanchico in 10 days, which is weeks before they thought they would arrive without this. And basically the two women agree to teach each other things. Yeah. Chapter 21 is titled Into the Heart. Every noble of Tyr is gathered in the heart of the stone. Rand had summoned them. The Terrans have never been called to the stone this way, so no one knows what's going on. Moraine is there looking around, but can't see where Lan is, even though he can sense he's nearby. Moraine talks to Egwene and basically tries to convince Egwene to get Rand's confidence, make him trust you. And she admits she's not happy about Egwene saying that she's going to go to the Waste, but maybe it'll all work out for Egwene. And she's like, at least Elaine and Nynaeve are on their way to Tanchico. Moraine looks around impatiently and is like, where is he? He's learned the first art of kings, it seems, making people wait. And Moraine's thinking to herself, He's a fool, boy. Maybe at least I can stop him from rushing back to save his village. He can't afford to do so now. Maybe he didn't even know the village was in danger. But, yeah. So Moiraine knows the Two Rivers is in danger and is keeping it from Rand. And then she looks over at Mat, who's there, and thinks to herself, he is an exhausting young man to keep track of. He keeps avoiding all my spies, not even giving any sign he knows they were there. She looks around for Perrin, and Egwene's like, maybe he's with Fail. They won't have run away. Perrin's got a strong sense of duty. And they're like, well, Fail was trying to convince him to leave. And Egwene's like, I like her. She's good for him. Just what he needs. And she cares for him deeply. Moiraine says, I suppose she does. But Egwene just says, you say it as if you don't believe it. They love each other, Moiraine. Can't you see that? Can't you even recognize a human emotion when you see one? And Moiraine just stares at her firmly, and Egwene is like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, basically. Very embarrassed that she spoke that way. Suddenly, the crowd at the other end of the hall starts parting. Rand striding down with the red coat with golden scrolls up his sleeve, with Callandor in his arm like a scepter. Behind him, 100 Aiel with their black veils up, ready to kill. Whatever Rand meant to say, he clearly intended to quell any resistance before it had a chance to grow. What was he planning? He hasn't told anybody. Suddenly they stop walking, and Rand speaks up. The High Lord Sunaman has guaranteed me a treaty with Mayene. He's guaranteed it with his life, and he laughs as if he made a joke. But Sunaman looked very ill at this. If he fails, he has agreed to be hanged, and he will be obliged. Everyone immediately stops laughing, and Sunaman's face looks green. Because of this treaty, the ships will be available to carry grain west to find new markets. But there's more. The armies of Tyr are to march. And suddenly everyone starts cheering and shouting and clapping. Everyone's excited, even the High Lords themselves, women smiling, kissing those who would go to war, and chants shout out, Ilion shall fall, Ilion shall fall, Ilion shall fall, Ilion shall fall. And Moiraine just whispering to herself, no, Rand, please no, please don't. Rand is smiling with a smile that never seemed to touch his eyes, and he lifts his hand, quieting the crowd, and says, the armies will move north into Karhain. The High Lord Milan will command, and under him, Guiam, Arakome, Hern, Marikan, and Saman. Their armies will be generously financed by High Lord Torian, the wealthiest of you, who will accompany the armies to see his money is spent wisely. There was silence at this announcement. Even Torian, one of the High Lords, the one supposedly funding this, seemed to have trouble even standing in his shock. And Moiraine is just giving Rand a mental bow. Those 7 men that he named were the 7 that plotted against him in Tyr, and none of those 7 men trusted each other. So if Rand sent them away on a mission, they'll be too busy fighting each other to plot against Rand even more. But the war part? Madness. The High Lord that was supposed to lead this excursion to Karhain spoke up, Milan, and said, My Lord Dragon, my Lord Dragon, interfering in a civil war is like stepping into a bog. So many different people want the Sun Throne of Karhain, because remember, the king of Karhain died. There are bandits in Karhain, starving peasants stripping the land bare. They're eating bark and leaves. And Rand cuts him off. You do not want to extend Tyr's influence all the way there? I know who I mean to put on the Sun Throne. You are not going there to conquer Milan, but to restore order, peace, and feed the hungry. There are more grain here in Tyr than we could possibly sell, and the farmers will harvest just as much this year, unless you disobey me. Wagons will carry this grain north behind the armies, and those peasants will not eat bark any longer, Lord Milan. And Egwene's just like, I knew he wouldn't start a war. I knew it. And Moiraine just thinks to herself, why would he do this? He should have gone to Ilion and taken out Samael. Why would he do this? What did he have to gain? I mean, it's humane, but senseless to do right now when there are bigger problems. Lanfear. What did Lanfear say to him? What has she done? And her heart chills. Rand would take even closer watching than ever now, Moiraine thought. She would not allow him to turn to the shadow. And Rand says, "Ah, yes. Soldiers don't know much about feeding hungry people, do they? I think a woman's heart is needed. My lady Altima, I know your husband..." So Altima is one of the ladies whose husband was one of the two guys that was trying to kill Rand, but the husband isn't dead yet. He's like on the verge of death. And so he's like, "Lady Altima, I regret intruding on your grief, but will you oversee distributing the food? You have a nation to feed." And she's like, "Of course." And Rand's like, "Well, as much as you love your husband, you won't want him with you in Karhine. Conditions will be hard for a sick man. I'll have him move to another lady's apartments, and she will care for him." And the other lady that was mentioned, Astanda, is like smiling, and Altima, her eyes rolled in the back of her head as she crumpled in a heap. Because the rumors, and again, this is the difficulty of a summary, but basically the rumors were that Altima was poisoning her husband over time to try to kill him. And so now she's not going to be there to poison him anymore. Egwene just says, "Rand just did something very clever, I think, and very cruel. He has a right to look ashamed." And then there's a few shouts in the crowd, and it says, "Karhine shall fall," but not a lot of people said it. One person yells, "With you to lead us, my Lord Dragon, we shall conquer the world." And Rand looks up, like startled, or maybe angry, and says, "I will not be with you. I am going away for a time." And everyone's like, "What?" And he says, or he lifts Kalendor before him and says, "The stone of Tyr held Kalendor before I came. The stone should hold it again until I return." Suddenly, Kalendor in his hand blazed white, and he whirled the hilt and drove it into the ground, into the stone floor, and blue lightning arced towards the dome that was above. The stone itself rumbled, the city shook, and people were screaming, heaving from their feet. And Moiraine's like, "What has he done? Going away? Why? What? This is the worst of all my nightmares." The Aiel were already all on their feet as the others tried their best to gain their balance. But Rand was on one knee, holding Kalendor's hilt. The sword was crystal clear again. And he said, "Look at this while I'm gone. Look at it and remember me. Remember I will come back for it. If anyone wants to take my place, all they have to do is pull it out." And he wagged a finger at them and said, "But remember the price of failure." And Egwene just says, "That man, is he mad?" "Oh, Light, Moiraine, he isn't, is he? Not yet, not yet, is he?" And Moiraine just says, "The Light send he is not, but I will find out." Moiraine and Egwene follow Rand as he leaves the room, and Rand sees Egwene and is like, "I thought you went with Elaine and Nynaeve to Tanchico. Why are you here?" And Egwene's like, "Well, I won't be here very long. I'm going to the Aiel Waste with Aviendha to Rhuidean to study with the Wise Ones." And he, missed a step, seemingly in shock. Moiraine asks him, "Why did you do it?" And he looks at her and says, "Altima, could I really have hung her for trying to kill a man who was plotting to kill me? Is there justice in that? Is there justice in anything I do? Lord Sunaman will hang if he fails, because I said so. He'll deserve it for trying to take advantage of people in the ways he has, but he won't go to the gallows for that. He'll hang because I said he would. I said it." And she says, "You know that's not what I'm talking about." And Rand nods and says, "Callandor, with that in my hands I can do anything. I know I can. But for now it's a weight off my shoulder. You don't understand, do you? Perhaps it'll help if you know it comes from the prophecies. You see, the prophecies state, 'Into the heart he thrusts his sword, into the heart to hold their hearts. Who draws it out shall follow after. What hand can grasp that fearful blade?'" And he says, "You see, straight from the prophecies." And Moiraine's like, "Yeah, but you forget something. You took it out. That means all the protections that made it so only you could take it are gone. A Forsaken could just come and take it. What if Lanfear comes back? Like, she couldn't use it because it's only men that can use it, but she could take it." And Rand just says, "If Samael or Ravin or any male Forsaken put his hand on Callandor, I almost hope they'll try. There's a surprise waiting for anyone who tries to channel it out of the stone, Moiraine. Don't think of taking it to the tower for safekeeping. I couldn't make my traps pick and choose. Callandor will stay until I come back for it, and by being there, it will remind them of who I am and what I am, and it makes sure I can come back without an army." "And where are you going? Do you mean to keep it a mystery?" "Not a mystery, Moiraine. Not from you and Egwene, anyway. Rhuidean." And Egwene just looks at him wide-eyed, and so does Moiraine. And the Aiel start muttering to each other, reacting for the first time. And Moiraine says, "You are not an Aiel clan chief, Rand, and have no need to be one. Your struggle is on this side of the mountains, the Dragon Wall. Unless, did this come from your answers in the Ter Angriel? I told you those answers can be cryptic. You might misunderstand them." And Rand just says, "You must trust me, Moiraine, as I've had to trust you." And she says, "I'll trust you for now. Just don't wait to seek my guidance until it's too late." And she thinks in her head, "I will not let you go to the shadow. I've worked too long to allow that, whatever it takes." So Rand is going to go to Rhuidean.